This is the art of network engineering, where technology meets the human side of IT. Whether you're scaling networks, solving problems, or shaping your career, we've got the insights, stories, and tips to keep you ahead in the ever-evolving world of networking. Welcome to the Art of Network Engineering podcast. My name is Andy Laptev, and folks, it's been a year. There's been a lot of change in my life. There's been changes in the show, in my personal life, in my career, and what a good time to have a discussion about change in general in our lives. How do we approach change in our lives? How do we see it? How do we frame it in our minds? How do we deal with it when it comes up? You know, I could tell you that when I was a younger lad, I did not like change all that much, and I wanted things to stay the same. And when things in my life changed, I did not handle it so well. And I would fight like hell to get back to the way things were. And as it turns out, that might not be the best strategy to deal with an ever-changing world. So tonight, I am joined by two wonderful chaps. First, William Wilhelm Collins of the Cloud Gambit podcast. How are you, William?
Never better. Happy to be here. I can already tell this is going to be a giggly conversation because I can't stop laughing for some reason. I feel like a 5-year-old.
Your middle name is not Wilhelm, correct? I just made that up on the fly.
No, actually, my first name is William. My middle name is Awesome. No, Levi.
Levi.
Everybody knows my middle name.
Wow.
I totally bought into the Wilhelm thing. I was like, what regal name he has.
If you say anything with confidence, people are like, oh, that must be true. William Wilhelm.
Confidence and straight face, yeah.
That other voice you hear in the ether, or the face that you may see on this YouTube video later, is Jeffrey Jebediah Clark. I was trying to think of something with alliteration. Jeff Clark, how you doing, buddy?
Doing all right. Doing really good. Glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. It's lovely to see your hatless face. It's been a very long time. Jeff is like a baseball cap wearing kind of dude, and you look great without the cap on. I mean, I might buy something from you if you looked like this. I don't know. I don't know if this is your normal look with customers, but I'm digging.
It's not. Well, in person, I would say it is. But
well,
you get cap wearing Jeff in.
But cap wearing Jeff hits all of his numbers, so no complaints on the wardrobe department from Jeff. And you know, this might be a good segue because you know, here we are on the Art of Network Engineering podcast, and the usual cast of characters. What accent did I just adopt? The usual cast of characters is not on this show and hasn't been around for a couple of shows. AJ Murray. So there was founding members: AJ, myself, Dan Richards, and the gentleman Aaron Weiler started the show. Aaron went on to do different things. We brought in Tim Bertino. And over the course of the years, for a number of different reasons, people came, people went. And I guess that's not too uncommon, right? Like you start a business or a company or a team. I mean, there's dynamics and things change and priorities change in people's lives. So I guess that's to be expected. But we're coming up, I guess, on 5 years. It'll be this July. For the Art of Network Engineering podcast. You know, we've done like 770,000 downloads in like the 4.5 years, and it's been an amazing ride and what a community. But I am the last standing founder of the show. You may have seen not too long ago on socials, AJ announced that, you know, he was moving on to other things. His priority changed, and, you know, and I mean, you can't blame anybody for, like, there's only so much time in the day. We have careers, we have families, we have hobbies, and like, you really have to be deliberate about your time if you want to live a fulfilling life. And, you know, AJ just, his priorities changed, and he's doing other cool stuff now. So I guess, so Jeff had asked me a while ago, like, different people have been jumping in to help me with the show. Like, everybody's gone, right? So I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? The show almost ended, in full transparency with the audience. So everything was going to shut down. And through a lot of conversations, I decided I want to keep the show going. And I've said this to AJ and the rest of the former team before, like, this podcast is probably the most fun part of my technical career that, like, I've had. All the people I've got to meet, all the conversations I've got to have, the things I've learned. I mean, like, 2 months in, I'm interviewing like Keith Barker. Like, come on, dude. Like, the people that, like, you know, taught me how to do all this stuff. And now Keith knows my name.
Of the industry.
Like, well, yeah, like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Keith and I are accountability buddies. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what? So it's been a wild ride. And, you know, I guess 4 to 6 months ago, it all almost stopped. I mean, it did stop. And then we had to decide. So there's been a lot of change, right? I decided to keep the show going. And that requires, I got to start an LLC and figure that out. And how do you do taxes? And I need a lawyer and a bank account. And I guess Jeff had asked me a while back, like, are you gonna like talk about this? Like, are you gonna have a conversation with your audience about the changes in the show? Because there's gonna be new faces. There's gonna be new, we have a bunch of different ideas for topics and series. And I wasn't going to. I'm like, nah, I'm just gonna keep creating great content. We're just gonna put it out there. People will figure it out. But the more I thought about it, like for 4.5 years, we've been so honest and transparent with the audience about like our lives and our challenges and what's happened. I'm like, it feels really inauthentic to, after all this time of being completely honest and vulnerable with our audience, to be like, oh no, we're not going to talk about anything. We're just going to pretend that isn't happening. That would be pretty dysfunctional. So anyway, here we are. A lot of people have been helping me out, which I really appreciate. Mike Bouchon came on. We interviewed Dr. Jay Metz from the Ultra Ethernet Consortium, which was great. My pal Colin Doyle came on. We talked about some automation with Jeff. William has been kind enough to jump in here. So I guess what I want to say first off is the show will always stay true to its core mission, really, which is just to keep this conversation going of like, here's what it's like to be in network engineering. Here's how you get in. Here's how you stay in. Here's how you upskill. It's always changing. We have thousands of people in our Discord community. People reach out to me every week telling me, the show changed their life, or the advice helped them get this job, or like, thank you so much for looking at my resume. Like, it's just a wonderful, at the end of the day, this is a community I didn't have when I was coming up. When I was sitting in my Comcast cable truck reading the CCNA book, and everybody was telling me I was wasting my time, money, and effort, except for my girlfriend, who's not my wife. So I kept her around. So I don't know if we want to talk about any of that, guys, or if we just kind of want to pivot to, I guess, just change in our lives in general. I mean, I've also changed jobs this year, right? There's a lot to talk about, I think, around change. And I just wanted to start with there's a lot of changes happening in the podcast. It almost ended. It's still going. And I have a lot of cool ideas coming up for this next year on stuff we're going to do. Any thoughts or feedback on any of that rambling?
Well, one thing I was going to say was I am really glad that that you decided to kind of have this episode specifically talking about change and the changes around the show, because you called me kind of in the middle of the kind of the transitional stuff and what was happening. And the one thing I really heard in your voice was how much passion you really had, for the art of network engineering and the A1 community and really the Discord channel. And one of the things you said to me was just how much this has, it's such an important part of your week, such an important part of your life. And we've got Connor in the chat who just, I think said something that's really true with this show, and really with any podcast that any of us are going to want to listen to, which is that the human component of the show is really the major piece that makes it. And I think that over the years, people have seen your passion, and it's interesting as I've been on the last few shows with you, kind of seeing you navigate what's new for you. It does seem like you really are looking to, like you said, maintain the same spirit, but it also seems like you've got some ideas and maybe wanted to change some of the. Is it the format you want to change? What do you think is a component that you really? What would you want to see in the podcast in the long run? So I don't know. Maybe I'm interviewing you now. Maybe I will interview you.
Well, no, it's wonderful, and that's why I ask smart people to come in here and help me, because I can't talk to myself for an hour about this stuff, right? So yes, please interview me, both of you. I think the hardest part about. And again, just for the audience, we're not going to spend an hour talking about the change of the art of network engineering. I really want to widen the aperture to navigating change in life in general, and have some, good advice you can take away from this, from some older weathered gents who may have gone through a few changes and weathered them better than 18-year-old Andy. So I can't speak for William, but I'd like to hear his feedback, because he's a podcaster as well. But the longer you create content for a particular audience, I kind of feel like the harder it's hard to stay true to your original mission. So our show, the first, 30 to 40 episodes was us interviewing network engineers about their career. And it was really the same format of who are you? What do you do? Where do you work? When did you get interested in tech? Oh, that's really cool. You were 8 years old and your parents bought you a Commodore. And then what happened? And then what happened? And we spent a couple of years kind of trying to tell stories, because what came out of all that was there isn't one way, there isn't one path. I failed out of computer science in college and thought that's it for tech for me. But then I got in a different way. And if we interviewed 60 different people, they all came in a different path, a different way. So I think this career is for anyone. You don't have to be a coder or a math whiz or computer science major or a CCIE to get in. And that was really nice. But after we did that for a couple of years, all of us got tired of the format. Like, if I have to talk to one more network engineer and ask them every career fart along the way, I'm going to throw up, right? So then what do you do? So I guess the shorter answer to your question is to try to continue to create engaging content and change when change is necessary. Again, like the topic of change. So, okay, we can't do straight interviews anymore. So then we kind of went topical because we were sick of it. And I didn't want to listen to another career journey. We had done that and killed it. And they're all still there. So there's 45 episodes in the beginning that you can get that if you want. I mean, Jeff, you said something to me, which I thought was really insightful. I don't know, it was 6 months ago before, a lot of this stuff started to change, but you listened to the show more when we started, but we kind of stayed beginning of career focused. As your career grew, our content became less relevant to you because you're like, well, that's fine, but I'm 18 years into my career. I've gone from engineering into like an SE now, and like me talking to the help desk guy, or the what I'm trying to do. I think the changes in the show is I'd like to stay relevant to network engineering and tech at large. And like, there's a lot of things changing, right? I think automation is finally becoming like you're going to have to do this. I mean, so I've talked about this before, but the job I had in fintech for 6 years that I was very good at, I couldn't get that job today because I don't have enough foundational Python knowledge. You cannot get the job I had unless you can pass a very technical Python interview. So the industry at least has changed, I think, to where automation has kind of become, and look in the certification tracks. I mean, I was studying for the CCNP as an example. There is a ton of automation in there. People who take and fail that exam are like, oh my God, there was so much automation. I don't think we're breaking NDA, but like, you really got to know a good amount of broad automation information to pass professional level networking certification. So what I'd like to see, we talked about maybe doing like an automation series to try to help people, because I don't want to automate, right? I don't like Python. I don't understand all this stuff, but so that was the old me, right? Like I've been saying that for years, but then I found a course that I liked and I used NetMiko to log into a Cisco router to like change the host name. I'm like, oh my God. So I just needed like something, just log into a router, figure that out. I thought we could do a series with William on like GitHub, right? Like, what is it? I mean, I have a GitHub account. There's a couple things in there. I star people I know, like they're my Facebook friends, but like, if I were interviewing for a job and you looked at my GitHub repository, you'd be like, well, this dude doesn't really have any code in there. So I like the automation stuff. I like to do some GitHub stuff. AI, LLMs. I mean, I know that we're all sick of hearing it and everything's AI whitewashed, but Jeff, you had some really good examples of how you've used large language model stuff like OpenAI to help you in, networking kind of tasks. And I mean, I use it frequently in my content creation, roles. So the short answer
here real quick, Andy.
Yeah,
I got to say something. I've been like, that's the longest silence I've ever had in my life. Usually I can't shut up. I was just soaking all that in. But anything in life, like no matter what you're doing, like the most rewarding things in life, they're always the things you got to work hard for. It's never easy.
Yeah.
And because it's not easy makes it that much more rewarding. So because of that, I'm glad you decided to keep the show going, because the easy thing to do would have been, hey, we're going to jointly, hang up our boots and our coats and just go on to the next thing. And, thanks for the fun times, but you kept it going because it meant something to you. You had a lot of work involved in it. And, I'm glad, because there needs to be a bigger variety of cool shows with different perspectives out there. And another thing you said I thought was pretty interesting is like in the beginning focus, it was just, okay, getting started in the career and like that, like the beginnings of that career trajectory. And I know that one thing that helped me out a ton in my early days was just hearing seasoned professionals talk about stuff I didn't understand. Like, what are they saying? That sounds so cool. And, it becomes like a very salty scenario. And hey, when there's salt, there's thirst. You become thirsty and you're like, okay, I want to learn about that. These folks seem to know a thing or two and they've made it. So like having the variety of beginner level all the way up to advanced, to where you can keep folks like Jeff interested, later on in the career, super important. And I think it's awesome the direction that the show's going to take now.
And that's tricky. How do you keep everybody engaged, right? Like you want to let people know that this career is for everyone and you can too. But at the same time, you have folks like yourself and Jeff who are further along in their career and like, what could I possibly teach you two guys or help, have the conversations. I mean, I really just see myself as a moderator. Like I've met a lot of smart, cool people. And if I can just bring them together and have these conversations, I know some people have said like their favorite part of the show, it just sounds like you're sitting around the pub with a couple of, friends talking shop, right? And it's very casual. And that's what I love about the show. Like these are my notes for tonight. It's a blank legal page. Like, I've probably heavily prepared for 3 shows, and I was probably the worst on those 3 shows because I'm looking at notes and I'm trying to think of what I'm going to say next, and I want to sound really smart. Being vulnerable and open, and like I can tune in right now and listen to you guys and be very aware of what's happening and in the moment. If I'm reading notes or reading chats or looking at myself on a screen, I'm just not present and I'm not there, and it doesn't really make for
conversational style wins. Like in the episodes, I think we're at like episode 45 now. And the ones that like Yvonne and I went into that were like completely unscripted, like we're just having a conversation and we're not going to overly plan this thing. Those are the episodes that coincidentally did the best as far as views. So,
and I wish I hadn't blabbed that long, Jeff, about where do I see the show going. I have a whole Asana full of topics that I'd like to do, but I'd almost put that back on you guys and even the community at large. Like I haven't wanted to go on LinkedIn or Twitter and be like, hey, everybody quit. I'm by myself. Tell me what you want to hear. Right. Yeah. But that would be super helpful, but that's not what people are looking for. Like, I don't know if everybody wants to be free producers on the show. And so that's my challenge. And I'm being perfectly honest and transparent is I want to keep doing the show because I love it. I really enjoy this. I mean, I do it for a living now. I'm in product marketing and it's the best job I've ever had. But, 5 years in, how do you keep network engineering interesting? Fortunately for us, along the lines of change, there is so much changing in tech and in the industry that, it's dizzying and it's scary. And it's like, holy crap, now what do I have to know? But these are the topics. These are the conversations that I want to have, right? Like, what do you need to know? Like when somebody asks you guys, how do I get a job in network engineering? For the longest time, I think it was, at least for me, it was get your CCNA, create some kind of content to share your communication skills and build a home lab. And if you can't afford a home lab, do packet trace or whatever. That was my advice forever. Do you think that's good advice today? Is it enough?
I always said learn Linux as a first. That was always because I can only say that though, because that is the road that I took and it worked very well for me. Knowing Linux has paid dividends even to this day because I use it in cloud pipelines. Like Linux, like bash scripts are the glue in these pipelines that like basically glue these disparate tasks together and set things up, like, get into make files and get into those different things. And
and why is Linux so important? Because the whole world is built on Linux, right?
Well, if you think about it, every network appliance that you probably log into now is Linux under the hood. And even like in the earlier days, like when in some, I'm not going to throw vendors around, but like you'd have an overlay sort of shell, the shell that you interact with. But under the hood, you could always go down a layer deeper. And when you really needed to troubleshoot, you really needed to debug, you'd have to debug at that layer a little bit lower and pull these logs or do these things to send to, vendor X, Y, or Z. And just being able to log in, being able to navigate the file system, being able to SCP some files, for goodness sake, at least learn how to SCP, different things like that. It's just and it's not hard. It's not hard at all. It's just time, a little bit of time.
And every smart networking person I talk to tells me that exact same thing. Pete Lumbus, just to throw some names around, like he's one of the smartest guys I know. And he's been telling me for years, learn Linux, bro, right? And I think I know a little bit of Linux, but probably, I can do most of the things that you said. So maybe I know a little bit of Linux, but I don't know if I could teach somebody Linux. Like I'm a very, very young. Jeff, would you add anything to so I want to get into network engineering. What do I do? The 3 things I mentioned. William says Linux. Is there anything you'd add to that?
I think learn Linux is I don't know that I would have said it necessarily that way, but I think it's a good point that really Linux it's an important part of my day to day. We talked about automation before. I automate because I know Linux. I have a ton of scripts that I've turned into little applets in my, in Linux. I'm running a Mac, which is Linux under the hood. And I have a bunch of scripts written in Bash, which we were talking about before the show started. That do things like, go and find the next available IP address in my lab and, SSH into something and you add this to my, list of host names in my DNS server. So I didn't really think about it until you said that, William, but I do spend a ton of time in Linux daily, just doing basic tasks. So I would absolutely say that's true. But the other thing that I will say the best engineers I know, and it's something that I have become better at, is diagramming. And I don't mean creating amazing diagrams. I mean being able to walk up to a whiteboard and draw out the network you're trying to design and explain to somebody what you're looking to do. Or when you're having a conversation with somebody else, say, hold on, let me diagram this out, and then diagram it out while you're having a conversation with them. And I'm not saying go and learn Visio diagrams or anything like that. That can get really complex, and there are people who are amazing at that stuff. But I mean, I use diagrams.net. There's a dozen different choices out there, but I would say learn to diagram, learn to whiteboard something. It makes it easier when you're building your own lab to have a diagram of your lab. It's something that is needed in every network. They need someone who can diagram that stuff and who can trace out how that network looks and provide some kind of documentation on it. So I would say learning to document a network is as important as learning to build a network. And it's a skill that most network engineers don't have. And it's a task that a lot of guys just, they don't want to be involved in. So if you can learn to do it, I think that it puts you in a position where you're really unique, and it gives a visual thing that you can show someone in an interview or put into your GitHub or on your webpage or whatever. So I guess that'll be my thing. In addition to learn Linux is learn to diagram, learn to whiteboard.
I was hoping you'd say automation.
Whiteboarding actually validates your comfort level and your ability to spin an idea too, because it's going to test you. Like when you're trying to whiteboard in front of a room of folks and then somebody else comes up. I mean, this has happened so many times in my career, I can't even count. Being able to communicate that idea and effectively draw it out in simple enough terms to get everybody on the same page, or for other people to give them enough to actually poke some flaws in that idea. And, sort of everybody leaves the room with the best possible outcome. It is super important, very abstract in the beginning.
And you just reminded me, so whiteboarding can also be used so not only just diagramming your ideas, like you said, but I know someone who I won't name, and instead of using PowerPoints when he presents to customers, he whiteboards. He already knows what's going to be on the whiteboard before he starts, but because it's a blank slate and it's interactive, and he'll ask them leading questions to write things down, it looks like he's taking feedback from the audience. Mm-hmm. When in fact, he knows where he's going the whole time. But what would you call it? The magic trick, I think, is they know where this is going before it gets written down, because it's their idea. And at the end, here's the real beautiful part of it. They think it's their idea. So he comes in to sell them on a different idea, and he somehow magically uses a whiteboard to convince them that this is their idea, even though it was his idea. Now, if he comes in with a PowerPoint deck and shows you 15 slides showing you what his idea is, we've all done that before, where we're like arguing with our wife or our kids, or like, if I just say it enough times or loud enough, they'll change their mind. So anyway, it just reminded me, it's a different use of a whiteboard I never thought of until I was talking to this
Inception.
There's a guy named John Cares who wrote a book called Mastering Technical Sales. If we could get him on as a guest, he teaches a whole class on whiteboarding and silly things like, if I asked you to write, to draw a router on the board, you could, you kind of know, you did a little circle thing. But one of the things he talked about was, if you're terrible at art, write in there what this thing is. Maybe this is router 1. But the thing that too many people do, and this is a silly thing that he taught, was like, you'll draw the circle, then you'll try to squeeze router 1 into it. Instead of writing router 1, then circling it. Like, there's so many tricks to whiteboarding. I'm amazed when I see people who are really good at it. Yeah,
so selfishly, I love this conversation because I'm writing these topics down because honestly, I'm trying to, like, you're asking me, where do you want to do with the show? I want to continue to create value. I want to continue helping people. I want to continue to bring cool stuff to light. And, I know I have so when automation came up, I'm surprised you lean on Linux, Jeff, because I figured you were going to say Python, right? I guess it doesn't matter. Like, does it? Do you need Python?
No, not to me. I don't dislike Python. I write in whatever the fastest thing for me to write in. 90% of what I do is in Bash, because I can just write it quickly. I don't. Again, I told you in a previous one, I'm a selfish scripter. I'm not writing it for anybody else. I'm writing it to accomplish a task that I need. It's a repetitive task, and Python, I just don't know well enough to sit and chunk it out, because it's not what I do every day. But Bash is simple. I mean,
when you say
bash
bash,
really
is that
easy.
the Linux shell? Is that what you're talking
It's
about?
the Linux shell, right?
Born
But
again.
Say it again.
Born again shell.
Born again shell.
Is that really what it stands for?
I mean, that's what I've heard other people call it.
Okay.
I mean, I got to Google it. I mean, unless
I
something's
believe
changed
you.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we have Linux, automation, whiteboarding, which I really like. And honestly, I can stand in front of a crowd of as many people and not be nervous. But you put me in front of a whiteboard and I seize up. And I think it's because all the technical interviews I've had over the years at a whiteboard are just terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, draw me a network. And what is it?
It is born again shell.
Born again shell.
Yeah.
Born again. Like it.
All right. So
I mean, one of the things I was going to say, Andy, it's funny is I asked the question, what do you want to do with the show? I actually saw you. I saw the network engineer in you come out, or really just the engineer in you. Because the thing I've always said about a good engineer is a good engineer doesn't necessarily know things. They know how to figure things out. And it's fun as we've been doing a couple of these episodes together. It's like I'm watching you like, all right, we'll figure this out. You don't know necessarily what the end goal is, but you're figuring it out. And so it's kind of fun to be part of that journey. But I also think it's kind of what's really resonating with me is this is an exciting show to be a part of right now because we're figuring it out. We're talking about topics. We're talking about things we want to do in the future. And as engineers, we're all a little ADD. So I don't think it has to be about one thing. There's a lot of it's just let's figure it out.
And I'll be honest with you, we've been figuring it out from the beginning. Like the fact that it took off and as many people listen was a big surprise to us as anybody, because we were just a bunch of people in a study group who started studying together. And then AJ one day was like, it's kind of funny. You think anybody would listen to us just like talking, just because like the universe put together these like 4 people that just, it was this weird synergy that we never could have planned. Yeah. And it just took, so here we are all these years later. And you know, the timing wasn't great because I started a new job right around the time all this went down. So I'm talking to my wife. I'm like, listen, you know, this is going down. I'd like to keep the show going. I'm going to have to do all this stuff to keep it going, including running it myself for a while. Like, cause I need her buy-in. I am not going to piss off my wife or screw up our marriage over this. Right. So there were many times along this path of like, this might not, I love the show. I want to keep it going. I love the people who contribute to it and listen, but I'm not going to end my marriage over it. And I don't know if I can do that and be effective in this new role because it's a new type of role for me. So it's kind of a miracle that we're here doing this because there've been a lot of barriers in the way. You know, I think you have to
figuring things out too. Like you go and like I don't know if you all have had this experience, but there's been like especially in the past 5 to 10 years for me, you get to know someone that you like in your mind you thought, you know what, they have it all figured out. They know what's up. And then you get to know them and you get to see a little more behind the curtain and you realize, wow, they don't have all this figured out. They're just going a day at a time too, just like I am. It's just they have 5 years on me. They got a little bit of a head start.
William said one of the funniest things to me when I met him in person, and it just jumped in my head and I just want to tell the audience. So I guess he had been listening to the show or whatever. And we were in Knoxville, I think, or I don't know if it was K-Tech Connect. It was some event. It was the first time we met. Do you remember what you said to me when you met me?
I do, because I still think it I look at Andy and I'm like, wow, you're exactly in person like you are on that show. It's like the same person. There's nothing different.
He goes, you're exactly the person I thought you were, or something like that. And I took a minute and I looked at him and I'm like, I don't know if that's a compliment or if you're
it's great because you meet so many people. It's like I work with someone and working with them on Zoom for a long time and camera angles and stuff. You think it's this little small man. And I meet him in person and he's like 6'4". He's huge. He's a giant. And I'm like, okay, like, wow. I mean, it's a little bit different personality wise when you're talking, but a lot of folks on Zoom or on, online, they're very different than how they really are in person a lot of times. And part of that is you want to put your best foot forward. You want people to see the best of who you are, but Andy's just raw, as raw as you can get, in person.
And I still don't know if that's good or not.
I love it.
But yeah,
I think it's great.
I don't know who he expected to meet.
Authenticity these days is winning.
I don't know who else to be though. I'm amazed that people can be other people in different contexts. Yeah. The last thing I would, I think we should pivot out of planning the show, but Linux automation. I really like the whiteboarding thing. So again, we're talking about what would you need to be a network engineer today that's different than maybe 10 years ago. Is anybody going to say the C word?
Oh, cloud. That one.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Do you think you need to be versed in one of the CSPs? Should you have your AWS whatever to?
I'm 1,000% biased here, so I should take myself out of the ring.
No, well,
and I'm a coward and I'm scared of it, so I'm going to go ahead and just shut up.
William fully pivoted to cloud, right? But you were a network guy through and through. So, yeah. I mean, what do you think? If you're hiring somebody, they obviously got to be cloud because you're a cloud company, right?
I think no matter what, if you're in network engineering and you work for a reasonably big company, you're going to do better by your career if you do learn a little bit about cloud and cloud networking, especially. And it's the starting point is simple. The landing point is very simple because you land and it's like, okay, how do we get to the cloud? Well, hey, at the end of the day, hey, this is just some VPN tunnels or a circuit, a direct connect, which is essentially just single mode fiber going from this to that in a data center. It's very network centric. So it almost feels like you're not learning anything new. But once you are in that cloud provider, be prepared as you're experimenting to paint yourself into many corners and then get paint everywhere, including on your face. It can be a mess. It's complicated. A lot of static routing like functionality applied in many different ways, like route preference, shortest path first. Like some things are still kind of applicable to like what you would expect, but transitive routing across regions, and then it's all mostly different across clouds. Same concepts at a high level, but it's not very deep either once you get in the cloud, because I think because of the economies of scale and, because of how these cloud providers are able to, scale up to support so many different businesses, they've built a system that they're very rigid in. And because of the way that traffic, you can't just hairpin stuff everywhere that you want. And, things work a certain way. Part of that is for scale. So you have to put on your engineering cap to design around a lot of things to meet the outcomes of your organization. But getting in there, free tiers are amazing. Get in the free tiers and just experiment. You can do it from your desk while you're on that long Zoom call as you zone out. You're a project manager or something if you're not needed in the conversation, multitask.
And you guys changed the names of things a bunch in the cloud, which just take things we already know and then you just give them new names, make it all confusing.
A WAN is not a WAN, everything. It's a cloud WAN or it's a VWAN.
Yep, it's a VWAN, it's a VNet. It's a
VPC or a VCN?
What's the same subnet they assign to everything?
The default subnet?
Was it like 172? Like everything that's built is given like the same address, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't give it anything, it's going to give you the default 10. Like it has a default address range. You'll give it, but whenever you create a VPC, you're definitely putting in your own CIDR range. I think
I just remember
folks learned a lot of hard lessons about that because many businesses put in the same /20 or /16 for every VPC they created, and then eventually they're like, "Oh wait, these got to talk." Oh boy, now we need a network, folks. We need some NATs. We need some folks that understand natting and want to do that exclusively for like 5 years now because we've kind of mucked this up a little bit. My cynicism there.
All right. So there's a couple of comments in the chat I'd like to read. And then if we could pivot to, or maybe pop up a level away from the podcast and into like just change in our lives. And I guess I have 2 stories from this past year that I think I'd like to tell because I think getting through hard things, I think we can all learn from, if you talk to people who go through difficult times and get through them, I think there's some like common advice or common, we're all going to get our ass handed to us at one point, or another in our personal and professional lives. So change is the only constant, right? And everything's changing all the time. Isn't that like what the Buddhists kind of say? Like, everything's changing all the time. So you got to figure out how to accept that. Like nothing's going to stay the same. So anyway, let's look at a couple of these. So I like what Bill Murray said. He's been avoiding learning network automation on his end. He thinks his hurdle is really understanding use cases to automate for. And like, I hear people say that. And what I immediately think is when we had to change the SNMP community string on 600 devices at a job I had, and they had to be done in like 48 hours because of some PCI compliance thing that like, something we got hit with an audit and like, how are you going to do that if you don't automate it? 600 devices. And we didn't have a big crew. Like you're going to go into 600 devices, do a show run, pipe match SNMP, pre-check, do your change, write, post-check, look at the logs. You're going to do that 600 times. Like, how many maintenance windows is that going to take you to do, right? Like, so for me, every time somebody says, "Oh, I got to find a use case," I mean, there's, what would you say to somebody who's like, "I can't find a use case"? I mean, is that a valid thing or is that an excuse? And I'm not trying to pick on Bill Murray, but repetitive stuff is going to take a long time.
It's like my
right?
child painting. Children are so funny because a lot of times, like, I almost get creative ideas just by looking at my children. Like, my daughter will sit there and create these beautiful pictures, and she's only 6, but it's like she thinks out of the box. And like with that, just in tech, like, okay, so much stuff is free. Yeah, you need to buy maybe a computer that's got some, a good CPU and lots of RAM, but set up a lab and then put together, you can literally map and mirror most, a lot of networks I've worked in anyway. You can get pretty close. Like, think about it, like, test yourself. Like, go back and think, okay, I worked on a network and this is what that network looked like. This is where the aggregation of all these routes is happening. These are how the branch offices are connecting back. And no, you don't got to do like 100, 500 branch offices. Do like 5 or 10. And okay, now I have some automation that's going to go out and update the config or even bootstrap a new device, once it has TACACS or whatever, and it's talking back to the mothership, it's being monitored, then go in and, build out some automation to go and bootstrap the actual configuration. So really, it's the one thing that I thought, or that I experienced, that was fantastic. And that's a good question, because I've struggled with this at some point too. But my best sort of thing that I learned was be creative. Just don't listen to a lot of other folks. Just think about the experiences you've had, the networks you've worked on, and maybe even how networks are supposed to be built. Look through that lens, and you just mess around, test, prototype.
I mean, for me, automation, like I said, is selfish. It's saving myself time, or it's me wanting to learn something. So I'll give you an example of an automation I wrote in my own house. I have teenagers. Until recently, groundings were a pretty common thing, but grounding doesn't work in terms of you can't go anywhere because they're teenagers. They don't want to go anywhere. They just want to sit in their rooms and be on their phones. So what I had done was I'd set up firewall policies, because I'm a firewall guy now. And my firewall policies could just block my kids' access to the internet. It's not that it was so common, but it got common enough that I wrote an automation script that I put into my iPhone using the scripting stuff that was in there. And all it did was it was a script that would SSH into my firewall, turn on the ground login policy, or turn off the ground login policy. That's all it did. But I was able to turn it into a little button on my phone. I'd click that button. It would SSH into my firewall. It would edit policy ID 71. It would turn it on. It would enable the policy. It would log back out. And then it would ask me, would you like to set a reminder to unground him? And it was all built on my phone. And it wasn't that I was using Python. I wasn't using Perl. I wasn't using Bash. I was using the stuff that was right there on my phone. But it was a simple automation that was kind of a fun thing to do.
And you're blocking all of his internet?
I was blocking all of his internet, absolutely. And then, of course, he figures out that he just turned off the Wi-Fi, and now
that's where I was going next. Like, how long did it take it to be like, wait a minute, I got cellular?
But here's the thing. I want him to start figuring things out. So it's great. I'm okay if he can hack around me. That's great. He's doing exactly what I'm hoping for. Like, that's what I would say. If you think automation of some sort is what you want to get into, don't worry about learning a language. Don't learn a language first. Come up with an idea of what to automate. If you can't think of an idea of what to automate, going back to the AI thing, go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I want to automate something. I want to learn to automate. Give me 10 ideas. Give me 100 ideas. Give me 1,000 ideas. That's something that AI is great for. It can give you 1,000 bad ideas, and out of that, there's probably at least one good one.
Yeah, and you can totally there's so much things in the cloud you can do very ephemeral for free. Like the other day I was working on something and using something called Terraform infrastructure as code tool, completely generating this pre-can environment. So using the random string resource, setting the link, the numeric value, special characters, whatever, of a name, like a unique name. Then I'm creating an AWS VPC, and I'm doing tags to format the name, like VPC hyphen, whatever that random string is. And then I'm creating an internet gateway, IGW hyphen random string. And then I'm using the CIDR subnet functions with Terraform to actually take the /16 I have and like etch it out into different subnets, and then setting the route table and attaching it to the gateway ID, all the way down to creating an EC2 instance that I can SSH into, automatically bootstrapping Tailscale within this device, and then I can connect to it. I don't even have to set your security group rules because it uses UDP hole punching to get through.
Right down
as long as I have that
way.
IGW.
It's a good one,
yeah.
Love me some Tailscale.
Williams is talking dirty. Using all kinds of whoa. Tailscale, UDP punch. Whoa. Hello.
There's so many cool things you can do. Yeah. And it's free. Yeah, I like free stuff.
Free stuff is good. You said infrastructure as code, which I actually put on my list as we were talking with a question mark. I had a guy I worked with at Juniper, Chris Margette, and he was big in infrastructure as code, and he built a Terraform provider for one of our tools. And he spent some time showing me Terraform and IAC. And again, someone who has historically been repulsed by coding. He was that guy that was like, listen, dude, let me see your Cisco CLI. And I'd show him in my lab. He's like, you're telling me you're not coding? Like, look at all this logic and this arcane language you're doing. Like, if you can do this and you're telling me that Bash or Python is beyond you, like, it's not true. You're lying to yourself. So he showed me infrastructure as code and Terraform. And I was just blown away because I really love the I don't want to call it like beautiful. That'll be like a little too far, but seeing what he was doing, I thought, like I would like to try to, like, if I had a small environment, maybe at home, like maybe that's where I should start. Like try to lab with some Terraform and just kind of, see how that goes. It is elegant,
beautiful though. You're right.
I'm looking for, right?
It's very beautiful. Imagine like logging into an Excel sheet or a Word doc and like writing some stuff out versus opening up VS Code with a beautiful theme, pretty colors, dark theme. It's like glowing in your room because the lights are off. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Code magic. I love it.
Home automation. Get into some home automation stuff. There's some really cool stuff you can do with home automation, and it at least gets your brain working in the area of writing scripts. It's fun.
You just read my mind. So like if we're out and we come home, I get in my driveway, I have to get on the phone, flip it up, hit the alarm, turn the alarm off. Then I have to hit the garage door opener and hit that. Then I have to go and turn the heat back up because we turned it down before we left. Like, this is what I do every time we come home. When we get in the car to leave, close the garage door with the one button, turn the alarm on with the other button, get the music going on the other. And it would be so nice. Like, every time I come home, I have to do those same steps. Now, I have no idea where I'd start. But for the gentleman, Bill Murray, I think, who was looking for use cases for automation, it doesn't have to be network automation. Yeah. If you get home every time and press 32 things on your phone every single goddamn time to get in your house, like, maybe I could automate that, right?
Here.
I don't know how, but I know Jeff Clark and William, and they could probably
and you got Google.
I do have. You control your own destiny, Andy.
Well, even ChatGPT, right? Like, Jeff, you were telling me that weren't you going in there? Like, didn't you ask it to teach you Ansible one night?
Yeah,
and it taught you
I
Ansible?
literally went in there, was like, teach me. I have no idea what Ansible is. I did not know if Ansible was a program I had to download off the internet or Ansible was a web page I logged into. I mean, I was that clueless about 2 weeks ago. And I went into ChatGPT. I said, I want to learn Ansible. I already had a couple of bash scripts going back to bash. I already had some bash scripts. I knew what I wanted to be able to string like 5 or 6 different things together, because every time I turn up a brand new firewall in my lab, I would have to go in. I'd have to give it a management IP. I'd have to go in and set the username and password. I would have to go in and give it a host name. I would have to then go, if it was a lab that was going to stick around, I'd have to go create a DNS entry for it. All of these things are things that I do in my sleep, and I can just type them out, and I can turn up a firewall in 5 minutes. Or I can run an Ansible script and do it in less than 30 seconds. And if I can do something in 30 seconds instead of 5 minutes, I'm going to do it in 30 seconds. Even though it took me an hour, 2 hours to learn to write that, I can now turn up 100 firewalls in the same time it would have taken me to turn up one. And that 2 hours, I learned something that I wouldn't have learned by turning up 100 firewalls, because I do it all the time. I already knew that. So I might as well learn how to do the same thing I do constantly in a different way that was automated, that was faster. So this whole episode's about change. I think that's really what change is about. It's kind of about, we get so stuck in a mindset that this is the way it has to be, and this is what I know, and I can't do this other thing. Just do what you already know in a different way. That's change. that's an easy way to get moving. Like this podcast, you know all the stuff to put it together. You're now just kind of you're moving some pieces around at this point, and you're figuring out different content for it.
And it's scary. Right? It's the unknown.
Yeah,
it's scary. You're uncomfortable, and so. I don't know if you guys are comfortable sharing your personal story, but I will. Maybe we'll spend the rest of this just talking about maybe a change in like our personal and professional lives and kind of how we got through it. Because I think it's relevant. I mean, we started out with the podcast because this has been so. One very brief story I'll tell you is I was sitting at the bank opening up the business account that I needed to continue the show, and the guy who I was doing the paperwork, he'd think, oh, let me make a bunch of copies and I'll be right back. And he left the room and I'm sitting there by myself, and the loneliness that I got hit with because I'm at this bank by myself, opening a bank account because I no longer have anybody on my team that I've had for all these years that felt like family to me. And the unknown ahead of me, like, I don't know if I can keep the show going. I don't know if anybody's going to be willing to come in and help me. I don't know what the future holds, but it means something to me. I love it. And I'm going to, in spite of possible failure, like success isn't guaranteed. And, maybe it would have been easier just to shut the doors when everybody else decided that, that they were going to reprioritize. But I just remember that moment of sitting there, and it was like, I got like a lump in my throat because I'm like, God, I hope I can do this. Right. Because it's scary and it's the unknown. And so two other quick stories this year. But I guess the point is, even though I was scared and I felt alone and I had a lot of feelings around it, it's been hard to maintain the friendships when all these other feelings of, whatever. I don't want to get too like mushy, but it just brings up some stuff, But I decided I'm going to do it anyway. This is important, and you have to do things, and maybe I'll fail, maybe I won't, but I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to let fear stop me. Like I was alluding earlier to like younger Andy and the choices I used to make. Like I really let fear rule my life as a younger man. And I've learned, and I got another example coming up, but one of the biggest lessons I've learned in life, and it's helped me in my career as well, is what's the thing about like courage? Like it's not lack of fear. It's taking action in spite of fear, right? Like it's okay to be afraid. You just can't quit. So I guess like a year and a half ago now, I get laid off from this job, right? I wasn't expecting it. Some of my other friends and stuff were getting laid off. But when I took this job, somebody I really looked up to brought me in, and I thought we were good and everything was set. And like, I didn't take that job knowing 2 years later I'd be out of a job. I didn't take that job as a product manager, having not managed a product, knowing that I'd hit the market later. And all anybody wanted to talk to me about was managing a product. And I'd have to tell them I didn't manage a product. Like this was not a short-term decision. This was like, I'm going to be here a while. I'm going to get some skills, and I'm going to be able to leverage this at, in other vendor places. So I get laid off, and I thought it was okay. Like the first day goes by. I'm like, I've been through a lot. I'll be fine. Second day goes by, right? It's right before Christmas, right? Which is great. The first Monday comes around. It's like a Thursday. So like Thursday, I'm fine. Friday, I'm fine. We do the weekend. I'm distracted. Well, Monday comes around. My wife goes to work. The kids go to school. I have nothing to do that day. And it just hits me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, fudge. Like, what the frick? Like, this sucks. And I felt like, I'm just going to stay in bed. I'm going to pull the covers up over my head. I'm just going to hide here. Like this is right. I'm an ass grown man. If I can quote Dan Richards, ass grown, but like I'm a grown ass man, and I'm like, I'm going to hide in bed. Right. And that's not good. Cause again, earlier times in my life, I didn't feel so great about things, and I didn't make great decisions at the time. So I'm like, well, I got a wife and I got kids and I got a family who's depending on me. I can't hide in bed. What am I going to do? I started to run. Now I hadn't run in 10 years because I got bad knees. I got a bad back. I got a story I tell myself, right? But I started to run. Because I'm like, well, I gotta keep my head right so I can interview and keep my career going. So anyway, I run 400 miles in 8 months. I run so much that I fracture. There's something called a femoral neck at the top of your femur bone. It's what turns into your hip. I not only fracture that, it was a grade 3 fracture. So grade 1 is a crack. Grade 2 is a worse crack. Grade 3, there's bone marrow leaking out of your bone, and I'm still running through it, right? But I needed to run. So I lose my job. I'm running for my mental health. I get injured. I can't run anymore. So where am I going with all this? So, my wife's still working the whole time, and we got 2 little kids, and she does all the food shopping and the cooking usually. I'm not proud of this. I've changed it since. But so anyway, she's like, oh, I got to go to, the food store and get some food. So I'm like, listen, let me do it for you. Like, you're busy, you're working. Like, let me go get the food. I'm driving home from the food store, and the thought occurs to me that my family would be better off without me. And then I should just take off my seatbelt and drive as fast as I can into a tree. Now, I've never said this publicly, and this isn't something that I'm really looking forward to like anyone or my employer hearing. But the reason I'm telling you this is getting laid off and being out of work for 9 months brought me to a point, even with running 400 miles in 8 months, that the thought occurred to me that my family would be better off without me because I got a pretty good life insurance policy on my head. And I thought, well, they'll have the money. She'll find another husband. The kids will be fine, right? Like, now, it was just a passing thought. The seatbelt didn't come off. I got home. But as soon as I got home, I told my wife, because I've had mentors in my life. And some guy told me once, like, well, you're only as sick as your secrets, man. Like, you got a bad thought. You got to get that out. You got to work on it. And so why would I share this and be vulnerable and possibly embarrass myself publicly? Like, people who find me on the show and hit me up, like, William, you kind of alluded to it earlier. You seem to have everything together and you have this great job and you have these people that listen to you. And like my son was in here earlier and I showed him some stuff on the internet. He's like, Daddy, are you famous? I'm like, well, not really. And there's a handful of nerds who know it. So he's like, he watches these guys on TikTok and all. And he's like, well, Daddy, go on Google and put your name in. That'll tell if you're famous. So I put my name in and my face just comes like everything is me. And he's like, oh my God, Daddy, you're famous. I'm like, I'm not, buddy. I just write a lot and there's a lot of stuff out there. But I guess the point being is you can look from the outside and seem like, oh, I wish I had that life, or I wish right. But I'm a guy who a few months ago wanted to take my seatbelt off and drive into a tree because I got laid off. Now, the point of all this is I've been at a new job for 6 weeks. It's the best role I've ever had in my life. It's the most fulfilling role I've ever had. It aligns with my strengths more than any other role I've ever had. And I think I'm going to be the happiest I've ever been in my career as a 30-something-year-old. It's taken me a long time and a lot of jobs and a lot of pain and stress to get to a job and a company and a role where I'm like, this is what I was born to do. It's been a hell of a year and I've had a lot of struggles and there's been a lot of change. And there was a moment when I thought about giving up. So what's the point of all that? Like, for me, I think that you have to be afraid, but do things anyway. And I think that it's okay, feel so lost and find yourself in a dark place that you consider giving up the fight for a better life. Because if you can just keep taking action and keep doing the next thing that you got to do to change, right? This is all about change then. Because if you give up, like you can't get out of a bad situation if you give up, right? So like, as long as you fight and stay in there and kind of believe that things can get better and you just hang in there long enough, you can. So that was a lot of shit to drop on you guys and the audience, but I think it's important because I've had a lot of people come to me and say, oh man, can you help me with this or that or resume? Like, you seem to have your stuff together. And just know that everybody that you might put on a pedestal, they're as human as any of us, and life is a bitch and change will come. And some of it's going to be really hard and we can get each other through it. I'm joined here by two amazing men who are helping me keep the show alive and going and creating a great podcast right now. And that means a lot to me because you guys don't have to be here. You have families and careers and stuff to do. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my story that turned dark, but ends happily.
Thank you for sharing. Like, I know so many folks that would benefit from listening to that are in the sort of the same situation. The job market's hard right now. And if it's just me, I can live and just figure things out. But when you have a wife that's depending on you, you have a family, you have children that are like looking at one thing that now with the ages they're at, they look at you like you're their hero. You're like the most important person in their life. You can't do any wrong. I know going from when I was younger and sort of getting my career going and I wasn't married, all I had to worry about was numero uno. I could study as long as I wanted. I can do as many up all nights as I wanted. I could, my structure, my schedule was so rigid. I could just throw time in blindly to everything to where, okay, I'm 3 kids now, 3 young children. They all have different activities. I'm doing a ton of driving. I'm traveling a ton for travel sports. The other day I was in, I don't know what city. I was in either Fort Wayne or Detroit at a hockey tournament. The whole family had come along. I'm sitting there like an hour and a half, or no, about an hour before I have to get them to the rink. The rink's like 30 minutes away. I'm holding my my new daughter, and she has spit up all over the last pair of clothes I have. I'm like a target for her. Like I've been spit up on every outfit. Like it was so bad we had to find a laundromat to do laundry in. Because like always, I only pack exactly what I need, not accounting for spit up accidents. So I look and it's just, I'm covered in it. Like, oh my goodness, you got to be kidding me. And then I turn around and I notice a whole bunch of yellow stuff on my sleeve. So not only did she spit up on me, she was having a blowout. I had poop all over my arm. And it's like, oh goodness. And at the same time, like what's streaming through my head is all the stuff I have to go back to work for on Monday that I hadn't done, that I have queued up. And it's like, this is the peak of stress at the moment for me. But, having other folks that are dependent on you, you really got to figure out time management. You have to consider stress and burnout, your personal relationships. And you think about your career plateau. Like, you have to take time for the people in your life that matter. You have to be able to adjust your priorities. But when you do that, I don't know about for you two, but there's this feeling in my chest, like, okay, now I'm like missing out. I'm not learning, or all these things are happening and I'm not going to be able to keep up. And that's hard. It takes a toll on your mental health. Anyway, that's all from me.
Totally, dude. I'm right there with you. It seems like family and career are just two diametrically opposed forces, and you never know what the right balance is. And in tech, you're right. You're always...
Tech is different though. Like I have friends in like I have lots of friends that do other things, and they are like 9 to 5 and they make real good money and they're doing just fine. And
dude,
like what? You got to work on
my sister-in-law's a pediatrician. She teaches medical school at the college. And her continuing education credits are a joke. Like she tells me that, like she's 9 to 5. She's got a ton of vacation, like, right. A freaking doctor with like lives in her hands, and us schmucks in tech are like, oh, gotta learn the next thing.
On the flip side, I love tech though. I love nerding out. It's just,
you have to.
Or you
but to your point with like a family and kids, and like, it's really hard. I stopped studying for a couple of years because I did get burnout at the tail end of my fintech thing. And, we went from zero clouds to multi-cloud. We went from no automation to automate or get out. And I was so burnt out with it all. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do my job. I'm going to do my maintenance windows. I'm not learning anything. I've had it. And I don't know if that was a great choice or not. Probably not.
So I was going to say, I think that kind of brings us all the way back around to how we started, which is what's something that you think it takes to become a good network engineer was one of the first questions we asked. And the episode's about change. I think that in reality, part of being a network engineer, part of being in IT, part of life is embracing the change. Network engineers, we figure stuff out. We don't know things, we figure things out. And things are constantly changing. Things are going to change. The jobs are going to change. What you used to have to know, you're going to have to know more. And that thing that you know really well is no longer going to be as important as it used to. And it's going to take a toll on you personally. If you can embrace the change, if you can embrace that, I don't know that there's many better jobs out there, because frankly, I think this is a really good time.
Good. Well, thanks for being on here, guys. I'm hoping to do it more often with you guys. For all things Art of Network Engineering, you can check out our website, artofnetworkengineering.com. That's where all of our episodes are. We have a link tree. Linktree/Art of NetEng. All cool things Art of NetEng. Most notably is it's All About the Journey Discord server. There's about 3,500 folks in there studying for all kinds of things, helping each other out, patting each other on the back for wins, picking each other up when they fail. If you don't have a community, you could hop in there, check it out. It's a great collection of like-minded folks in there. So we're going to keep the show going. I hope that you continue to enjoy it. If you have any feedback, let me know. Reach out. If there's something you'd like to see or hear that you haven't, I'm happy to consider it. If you want to get on the show, hit me up. And I'm hoping this time next year we're through this little transition, through all this change, and we're keeping on. So as always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Art of Network Engineering podcast. Hey folks, if you like what you heard today, please subscribe to our podcast in your favorite podcatcher. You can find us on socials at Art of NetEng, and you can visit Linktree/Art of NetEng for links to all of our content, including the A1 merch store and our virtual community on Discord called It's All About the Journey. You can see our pretty faces on our YouTube channel named The Art of Network Engineering. That's youtube.com/Art of NetEng. Thanks for listening.